This is the Psychedelic Medicine Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Psychedelic Medicine Podcast. I'm Dr. Lynn Marie Morsky, your guide on this journey. And this week, we're discussing supporting survivors of psychedelic abuse with Erica Siegal. Erica is a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapist, community organizer, and harm reduction advocate. In 2019, she founded Nest Harm Reduction and Counseling, a California-based mental health and psychedelic support organization that provides psychotherapy, outreach, education, and integration. She recently founded Shine Collective to support survivors of psychedelic harm and abuse. Erica is one of the people I first met in the psychedelic world, and we've had her on the podcast before. She's a wealth of information and also one of the most heart-centered harm reduction advocates I've ever met. She's got her whole soul into protecting people in this community. I really appreciate it. So I'm looking forward to this chat. But before we get to Erica, just a reminder that the Psychedelic Medicine Podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing here is to be construed as medical or legal advice. And one last reminder, if you are a clinician and you'd like to learn more about psychedelic medicines, please check out the Psychedelic Medicine Association. It is our mission to get you up to speed on psychedelics so that you can feel comfortable discussing them with your patients and referring when appropriate. So if you'd like to learn more, please head over to psychedelicmedicineassociation.org. Now, without further ado, thanks so much for joining us today, Erica.
Hi, Lynn Marie. It's so good to see you.
I love having Erica on. Erica was the Zendo goddess, I believe, back when I first did harm reduction. No, you were doing harm reduction. I was doing the medical tent at LIB many years ago, and I love that we have come in kept in contact. I think that was like 2014.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
almost 10 years.
it's 10 years. Ah.
We look great, by the way.
For all of you who can't see us, absolutely fantastic. Nothing's changed in 9 years. I dig it. I dig it. This is you can see why I like Erica. Very, very much of the same kin. So, Erica, as I said in the intro, you've done so many things over the years in harm reduction. You were always looking out for people. And then I saw you in Denver at the Psychedelic Science Conference this year, and you told me about Shine Collective. And I was just beyond excited to hear about this because this is such a necessary project. So, before we get into kind of what the nitty gritty of the need for Shine and the kinds of things that it's going to be doing. Because again, this topic that we're talking about today is supporting survivors of psychedelic abuse, which is what Shine Collective does. But I think part of what's important is kind of elucidating all the different abuses that unfortunately are occurring, and because I think sometimes people may have suffered these abuses and not even know that they were abuses because this kind of altered state of conscious world is so nebulous and there aren't a bunch of regulations, so you may not know that something happened to you that was inappropriate or that could have been done better, and maybe you had some adverse outcomes from an incident, a journey, and you don't know why. So I think elucidating what those harms are will be helpful as well. So Erica, please let us know just what led you to start the Shine Collective, and then we'll get into some of those other nitty gritty things.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It's such an important topic, and it is not, a very like fun or sexy or exciting topic, but unbelievably necessary in the psychedelic spaces that we're working in. I spent, almost a decade kind of in the trenches at music festivals doing crisis response, which is where we met. And so I saw, a wide range of adverse reactions to psychedelics, to polysubstance. And a lot of it, was rooted in sometimes pre-existing conditions or medication issues, and just watching the kind of lack of knowledge around psychedelic safety amongst consumers, and then also watching people who were facilitating or even supplying substances to people who weren't, giving good safety guidelines. And we were watching people get harmed by dosing or adulterated substances, but then kind of in this crossover world of being in this recreational space and moving into kind of medicinal, ceremonial, spiritual, and medical use, we're finding, extreme abuses that are happening. Uh, Obviously not in the majority of the people who are engaging in psychedelic use, but there is a population of people who are u utilizing substances unsafely, facilitating in an unsafe way, all the way up to people who are being sexually assaulted, people who are dying, people who are being financially manipulated or coerced. One of the big things that we are exploring in psychedelic ethics is this idea of suggestibility and coercion. And so, are you doing the things that you want to be doing, or are you doing the things that the community or facilitator is telling you to do, right? It's almost like this, it's the same overlay of what we see in abuses in religion and in evangelical churches are mimicking, are repeating themselves in a lot of these psychedelic communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that crossover, and also, I've seen a lot of recent work around cults, and a lot of what makes a something qualify as a cult, and a lot of the coercive control, and a lot of that seems to also be in these people that kind of brand themselves. Recently we did an episode on psychedelic self-absorption, and we'd previously done one on psychedelic narcissism, on these people that kind of become that, like, this brand themselves as some kind of guru healer, and then that can lead to some coercive control like situations. And
Right.
again, well, under coercive control, again, like you said, people are very impressionable, and all these other, it can be financial abuse, can be spiritual abuse, sexual abuse. There's so many different types. And so that's why I really appreciate the work that you're doing to bring some of those things to light. So let's actually just get into some of those, if people might be wondering, like, what does this really look like? Let's even just start with financial. Let's talk about, maybe, and this is, like, the lawyer in me is like, oh my God, how do you discuss these without pointing fingers and all the things? So let's, as generically as we can, discuss some scenarios that is what things might look like if somebody is exerting some, let's say, financial coercion in one of these situations.
This is like a really juicy topic when we talk about psychedelic ethics. And so I'm really happy that you're bringing it up. And I will talk about this in the most general ways that I can. Um, there is a line of financial coercion, and there was an article that Jules Evans wrote sometime in this past year around like psychedelic fundraising, right? Is the person that is facilitating your ceremony also the person who is asking you to donate to their startups or their charities or their right? And how far in the afterglow of a really big psychedelic experience do you feel like you can even ask that question? And so in that article, and I think it was Jules Evans and Joseph Holcomb Adams, who are both advisors in the Shine Collective, um, and dear friends of mine. But it was kind of like a let's have an industry call for a 14-day hold on asking for any sort of financial donation, contribution, things like that, right? There's also guidelines of pricing and what is, abusive pricing around ceremonies. And everybody has a different price point, right?
Yeah.
And I like to I look at like Burning Man as the example of this is you can go to Burning Man by yourself, like for, if you live drivable distance, somewhere with gas and everything else, you can do it for under $2,000 if you really tried. But there are people out there, like famous celebrities who are paying, 50, $60,000 to go and flying in on private jets and things like that. And like it's the same event, right? And so it's the same, experiential altered state that like when you go into a festival, like we all experience in a collective celebration. Um, but like there are different price points. And so what is, inflation? What is the correct price for a medical treatment versus a community ceremony versus one-on-one work versus a 10-day retreat, right? All of these things have different price points and different clientele that they're going to attract. And so kind of what's the industry standard around that? I think that's kind of interesting. And what I find is really kind of, I don't like using the term underground, but I don't have a better term for it right now, but for, underground one-on-one facilitators who are kind of still working in these silos, right? They are charging a lot of money. And then you also see people who are like, "Oh, well, if you want to keep working with me, it's this price." And like all of a sudden the access to psychedelics, the spiritual access now becomes this like, well, I have to be paying this person, $1,000 a month to like just be on their mailing list because they are the person that is acting as the point between me and my spiritual access. And
Yeah.
so part of it is this like kind of like MLM community, like snake oil salesman stuff where people just get trapped into these. This is the only way that I know how to get psychedelic access. And the price keeps going up and it keeps inflating. And what am I getting for it? And so there's kind of this like slippery slope. And then there are extremes. There was a legal case here in Los Angeles of two individuals who befriended an elderly uh, doctor in Malibu and started giving him psychedelics. And while he was under the influence, went in and stole $3 million out of his bank account, right? Like that's a really clear financial abuse. That's a criminal financial abuse. But then there's these things that are kind of in this gray area that everybody's still trying to figure out. And so just like we see in uh, tarot readers and spiritual healers and the yoga community and the meditation community, it's echoing that same thing. And so if you find yourself kind of in a trap of overspending, that's kind of a good warning area. And some people are like, oops, like, this person got me for, $5,000 or something. And then they like cut the tie. But cutting the tie when it comes to psychedelics is even harder because it feels like you're cutting the tie to like a spiritual experience. And so you end up kind of in these really uncomfortable situations. And one of the aspects that Shine will be addressing will be, what does financial abuse look like?
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. And thank you for some of those illustrations. I was thinking, it popped up in my head as you were talking. I remembered, and again, this location shall remain nameless, but there is a certain retreat center, and they were apparently, while people were still under the effects of the medicine, selling very expensive aftercare packages. And these are the kinds of things, if you like going into a retreat, and it's hard because once you're on the medicine, it's really hard to like remember all those things that you knew for sure before the medicine, right? But like if we can plant this in your head right now, please do not make major financial decisions in the aftermath of taking medicine, right? Like they The people who are doing this know that you are feeling so much like the thing that they just gave you is absolutely life-changing, and you would give them freaking all your money to keep the aftercare up. And that is where they get you. And please do not do that. And this is one of the things that, like, as we get further and as we try to, the more that you and I and everybody who's been on the podcast discussing this, try to like talk about what to look for in a retreat center and what not to look for. Like, please do not, please avoid places that, well, if I mean, it's hard to tell whether or not they're going to be selling you on the medicine. That's not something they tell you up front. But if you find out about that, let people know I only know because somebody told me that that was happening. I didn't go to this retreat center, but now I tell people, please avoid it, because that is not a
Ethical.
ethical way to do this. No, absolutely not. And
So
so
I
go
like
ahead. Yeah.
to I like to suggest to everybody that they have a psychedelic escrow account, right? Any big decisions, any financial decisions, anything like that goes into a 30-day escrow after a big psychedelic experience, and then you can unlock the escrow account at 30 days and make those same decisions.
God, I love Erica. Yes.
But
So good. So
right.
practical.
So use your escrow account. And then the other thing that I say, if you are a like well-intentioned facilitator or retreat center or something like that, and you do have aftercare packages, you should put that in your your pre-ceremony information, your informed consent, to say, hey, we do offer these packages post experience. This is what the pricing is. Like, we will make sure. And so if it's upfront, like, it does kind of it takes the surprise out of it, right? And we do the same thing with people who are working with medicine when they're polysubstance, right? Like, once the experience starts, you can't add anything that's unknown. We do this in medical research, like on the MDMA clinical trials. In our informed consent, we might administer additional medication based on your reaction, right? That is in all informed consent. And so, like, anything that's going to be happening, any other substance, anything that's going to cost money, any donations, like, all of that should be clear up front, and people can still choose to engage in that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very, very good point. So first off, thank you for bringing to the forefront the fact that there can be financial abuse. I think that has been almost completely ignored. So, and props to also having such a fantastic board. And since you brought up Jules Evans, he posted something today that I think I'm gonna read this. I think it will open some discussion. But he posted something on Instagram about, forgive my language, kids. This is reading directly, but he says you could call them flow boys or spiritual fuck boys. You know the sort: long hair, a lot of beads, slightly effeminate, ready at a moment to share their trauma and healing journey. They've worked out that within a certain ecosystem, i.e., New Age spirituality, this sort of shameless behavior actually increases their chances of getting laid. Now, I swear this is all getting to a point, right? Spiritual pickup artists have learned to engineer rapid faux intimacy with vulnerable women through spiritual pickup techniques like touching, name dropping, deep sighing, use of exotic words that suggest spiritual maturity, and above all, eye gazing. Many people have reported that they trip out during eye gazing practices. Now imagine that you attribute all these spiritual effects to the charisma and spiritual power of the person staring at you. Wow, what a divine conduit they must be. How close to God. They must be really special, illuminated, good person, and they really see me. Nope, they see a target, an easy mark. A generation of spiritual fuckboys has been raised on eye gazing techniques that cultivate the surface appearance of spiritual depth and authenticity as a means to gratify their desires. We are mistaking fake intimacy for integrity. Never mind their bottomless eyes, watch their actions. That's from Jules Evans' post today on Instagram. And I think that transitions us into, well, I want to bring up this because he's referring to them as fuckboys and referring to the victims or survivors as women. But as a friend of mine wrote to me and actually pointed out, he asked, in fact, can this be both ways? Can women do this as well? And I have to say, I absolutely witnessed this on a psychedelic retreat I was on myself, where a male person had it had a slightly different form, but I think this is what I wanted to get into was more kind of the spiritual abuse, because it can lead to sexual abuse. But I think even just the spiritual abuse of, like you said, having anybody put themselves as the conduit between you and God, source, your spiritual experience, your own psyche. I think that's part of kind of the spiritual abuse realm. So, do you want to talk a little bit about what your thoughts are in that?
My thoughts on spiritual fuckboys.
Yeah, well, on spiritual abuse for in all of its forms. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I've been kind of on a bit of a deep dive around kind of manipulation and coercion, and where is the line between society influence and authenticity, right? Because some of us could say that, like, I did my hair and I put some makeup on my face today. Like, am I manipulating people into thinking that I look different
Yeah.
than I do? And now there are people out there who have, different skin disorders and things like that. And it is literally like they have so much more confidence when they go out into the world. Are they being manipulative because that's not what they look like when they take off all of the hair and makeup and everything else that society tells us that we need to put on? Um, in the same way that eye gazing or spiritual connection or doing breath work together or doing ice baths together or doing anything that like sets off our dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, like in a community container, we are lonely and isolated in society right now. And like those things feel even more potent. And then you put those things on top of psychedelics. Like, of course, those people are going to become the people that you trust in your most intimate, vulnerable states. Um, do I think that the people who are working on themselves and on a healing path and are doing the best they can, like, are still spiritually, emotionally manipulative? Like, yeah, of course. I think it's about intention and awareness. And I think, we see a lot of this overlap in the ethical non-monogamy or non-ethical non-monogamy, but in the like polyamorous, queer kink communities. And I take a lot of the like ethical guidelines and boundaries and things like aftercare for psychedelic work from the BDSM kink community, because they are also, putting people into vulnerable, altered state experiences that involve a lot of consent, a lot of negotiation, and a lot of aftercare for everyone involved. And I feel like psychedelics could really learn from that, while also not starting to cross everyone's sexual boundaries, because these psychedelic sex cults are starting to pop up in decrim places, or um, becoming more public about the work that they're doing. And I think that there is a lot of healing that can come, a lot of healing from sexual trauma, healing in your sexual identity, healing in any kind of, like sex and intimacy. I think psychedelics can be really potent. And I think it's a big, heavy crossover of a web of harm that could be crossed. And so I think part of it is having hard conversations and creating agreements and talking about boundaries, and like using your friends as a reflection, right? Like if like all of your friends like don't like that new like hippie Wookie boy that you've been hanging around, um right? Like a part of it is this, what are what's the framework for an emotionally abusive relationship, right? Isolation from friends. And so like if you're finding yourself in these kind of relationships, or finding like, spiritual men or women who like are almost like coercive, it's almost like it's like feels like you're under a spell a little bit, right? Some of that is like new relationship energy, and like some of that is like, hey, I need to check myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um like let me bring this person around my friends who like know me and are like, is this the person who I align with?
Yeah. And
And I think that's helpful. Um And I also know, the psychedelic community it is a community, and of course, like, everybody's dating each other. I am a big advocate for, if you're doing psychedelic work, with, psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy or any sort of other ceremonial work, I don't particularly like husband and wife teams.
interesting.
Um
Expand, if you will.
there have been husband and wife teams that have kind of covered for each other's abuses.
Oh yeah.
There's, a lot of relationship dynamics that turn into like a mom and dad like
Yeah.
projection,
Mhm.
which sometimes is helpful and sometimes isn't helpful. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think also if you're working with in partnership, in facilitation partnership, that there are other partners that are kind of trading out, and that you like almost work as like a cohort, and
Yeah.
anybody can be interchangeable.
That makes
And
a lot of
so not
sense.
only that, but also if you're facilitating, you should have a consultation group of other facilitators in which you consistently welcome constructive feedback,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right? And be
Mhm.
able to have case consultations and be able to like have reflection. And so again, the like facilitators who are working in these silos, or facilitators who are like facilitating kind of in an MLM like pyramid scheme
Yeah.
of like there's one person at the top, and then there's,
Yeah.
10 underneath them, and then 10 underneath them, and like, right,
Yeah.
like traditional MLM stuff. Those are like kind of the warning signs and red flags.
Yeah. And I'm going to set this up where Erica is definitely more of the expert in this, and I'm just going to say some stuff that I've seen happen. Um and feel free to comment on this, but I spent a hot minute in Austin, which is probably the hotbed of most of these things. Maybe also Bay Area, but Austin definitely saw it. Um saw a specific instance where I was speaking with somebody, she was kind of new to the community, and she's like specifically like, "Oh, this one guy has really been helping me so much. He has me over to his house and then he gaze it like just the absolute setup." And this person I had known from, I had been at his first psychedelic journey, which was not that long before this conversation. And now suddenly he would let me know that he was facilitating women only circles, completely untrained male facilitating women only circles. Like somebody else called me when they got word of this and said, "Why don't you call it what it is? That's an orgy." Like, this is just like, look at the situation you're getting yourself into. Is this person inviting you over and eye gazing to you, and he wants absolutely nothing from you ever? Like, or is he really attractive and you're pretty attractive? And like, this could be a very convenient setup when you are very much under their spell of, they are the one that has been seeing you. Like that post by Jules Evans says that, like, these are the things, like, and unfortunately this is the issue, is like you said, like, there are populations that are more vulnerable than others, maybe younger, maybe they've already suffered abuse, that they're new to a certain scene and they think this is just how it goes, or they just are so desperate for help and connection that anybody who connects to them is suddenly their guru. Like, these are people that, like you said, if you are the friend of this person, be the friend that says, I'm not sure this guy is right for you, right? Like, this is not how this is, and part of, like, yes, in people listening to this, there's the, we should do underground, we should do medical, there's all the sides. I'm very much into both and need to be there, but it is one of the in theory, benefits of the medical system that, of course, like there are still people with medical licenses and training and all that that abuse people, absolutely, but there is somebody to report them to. And that's kind of the thing, is if you've got some guy bringing you over to his house, not to a, a retreat center, right? Eye gazing, he's your guru, he's facilitating women only ceremonies without talking extensively about their training and all of the boundaries at the beginning, and then there's nowhere to report that person. Like, these are setups for really bad situations. And so I think this is what, like a lot of what that, Jules was kind of talking about is like, once the eye gazing starts and that connection starts, then they're in that, the person is in that same vulnerable situation for all the other types of abuse, including financial, including sexual.
Right. And emotional
Yes.
neglect and all of those things. And so uh, I'm just going to put it out here, which is don't have sex with your psychedelic facilitator.
Yes.
Like anyone out there, like psychedelic facilitators should not be having sex with people they are facilitating psychedelic ceremonies for. Um, Now there's like this, recreational space where you're with your lover, you're with your friends, right? And there's a very clear difference, right? Between somebody who is a
Yes.
facilitator and if you are engaging in recreational use in community.
Yeah.
Um, and so if you have a psychedelic facilitator, right? That person should never have sex with you ever. And so just if they are, then they are assaulting you. It should be criminal. In most cases, especially if it's in the medical community, it is criminal. Um, but that, it doesn't stop people from abusing other people. It's a small percentage of the population, but it still happens in non-psychedelic spaces. And I think it's happening a lot more in underground spaces than it is in above ground spaces, but that doesn't discount either of them because both are going to be part of our future.
Right. And I think a point to make here is that if anybody suggests that having sex with them is part of your healing, run. Like, that is not part of your healing. That is part of their lust. That is unrelated. Like, that, I think that is, just like anything else, when you're under that vulnerable state, they can say, you got to pay more for more healing. You got to have sex with me for more healing. No, none of those things are required for more healing. This is just absolute abuse at that point. Please get yourself out of that situation. Just know going into it, if we can plant that seed in the back of your head, because we know once you're under the medicine and you've got this attractive facilitator in there, they just facilitate this amazing ceremony and you saw God or whatever, and then, like, of course, let me further my healing by sharing this bed with, no, this is
Right.
not
And
required for your healing.
it's also like very normal for people to have confusing sexual intimate feelings for their facilitators. It is on the responsibility of the facilitators to hold that boundary. And so
Yes.
it's right. It's almost normal, like when you are in these spaces, that you have this heightened sense because there's a power dynamic, there's a power differential. Like, let's just call a spade is like, if you are a psychedelic facilitator, like you shouldn't have a harem of lovers that you just continually cycle through. I don't know if that's part of the, like, facilitator package, but like it's not. And so that's kind of a wary, like a big red flag.
Yeah.
The other thing is length of time that somebody's been working with medicine or facilitating. Right? You brought that up about like you were at this person's first psychedelic experience and now you're hearing that they're facilitating, right? Um apprenticeships, learning from elders, taking trainings, taking periods of integration from psychedelic practice, right? If you're drinking every full moon, and every new moon, and then every weekend, and then your weekends go from, instead of from Friday to Sunday, they're now Thursday to Monday, and now all of a sudden you find yourself in, disordered, dysregulated use. Um, that's a great time to come back to a baseline, and take some time to integrate. For facilitators as well, I don't think that anybody who should be facilitating if they haven't studied, apprenticed, and taken a period of integration and then returned to the medicine. And when I say a period of integration, that's somewhere between, a minimum of 6 months, probably ideally a year or 2 of like off of medicine before you like re-engage in it from a facilitator standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good
So if
point.
you're finding these people who are like, "Oh, I took mushrooms for the first time 2 years ago and now I'm facilitating like at my house in Snowmass," like it's like that's kind of like friends doing substances together and not like a facilitator thing, and so that's also right, that's pricing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
right, you shouldn't be paying somebody thousands of dollars who is untrained,
Yeah.
and hasn't had periods. There's a great other podcast. Can I
Yes.
shout out other
Of
podcasts?
course.
Great. The Emerald. Um, the Emerald podcast, the guy's name is Joshua Schrei, and it's about myth and trance states. And there's a great one that he came out that recently that talked about AI and talked about sorcery and talked about how we're like casting spells and opening doors that we might not be able to close. And I feel like that's oftentimes in new psychedelic facilitation is they're like, "Oh, this is great. It really helped me. It changed my life, blah 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 blah." And like you don't know what's going to happen when like a demonic entity all of a sudden shows up in the room because you've never experienced that before. And so like don't open up spaces that you don't know how to control. And it's
Right.
good for you to learn how to control spaces.
Right, right. I don't know, some training. This is one of those. I mean, you remember that saying that was like, "See one, do one, teach one." This is where I want to say, hot no. This is not see psychedelics, do psychedelics, lead us. No, this is see one, do one, spend years in training, apprenticeship, with some humility, then lead one. And I think that's where a lot of people get really I mean, so many people, we've talked about this, I think in the the episode we just did with Adam, like the second you get like, oh my god, these saved my life, I want to save everybody else's life, does not make you a facilitator, right? Like if you really feel super called, go get an integration coach training and start something mild like that, right? But just like the people that I know that just instantly start serving with, like you said, no training on what to do if there is a spiritual emergency, um an actual medical emergency.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so here's the interesting thing that you brought up about eye gazing and about like the spiritual ego narcissism. One of the things that I recommend as an integration activity um, is to volunteer in your community's soup kitchens and in your community's outreach and go out in with your unhoused neighbors and do some eye gazing with them.
Yes.
It will it will counteract the spiritual fuckboy eye gazing. Think of it as like immunity, right? You're getting your eye gazing vaccine.
That's so good. That's so, I mean, like that really hit me. That is a profound activity that I have not even heard suggested before, but absolutely how wise that, absolutely. And I think that's such the point, like that I was kind of trying to make is like, is this person eye gazing with you because they are just so good that they would open their heart and their minds and their house to everybody? Or is it because you happen to be their similar age, the gender they prefer to be with, and their type? Would they be eye gazing at a soup kitchen trying to heal all of those people who they can't get anything from, right? Like this is what you have to start thinking about. That was brilliant, Erica. I love
Yeah.
that. I want to bring up here, transitioning into some of the things that I want you to tell us what Shine will actually be doing. But we had this discussion in Denver. So, um, I have had multiple episodes out on how to choose the right retreat center, right? And I also run a psychedelic association and a podcast now for like 4 years. In theory, I should be very good at choosing a psychedelic retreat, right? Should be great. I was recently, essentially, like for lack of a better term, sexually assaulted at a psychedelic retreat that I had gone through all of I mean, I had like vetted this thing up and down and it still happened. Um, and by the way, I'm okay. But, there were periods of time where like, things were not great. And like, if I can't protect myself and I have this much exposure to everything that I'm supposed to be checking out for, it proves that nobody is immune from this, right? Like this could happen to anybody. And like I said, in that same retreat, happened to a male. So it is not only women, right? And there are all kinds of, improper things that can happen on the financial, spiritual, sexual, emotional levels, all of those. Don't think, oh, because I wasn't actually like raped at my thing, I was not I didn't suffer in some way, because especially in these altered states of consciousness, whatever way you suffered can certainly manifest really deeply, right? Could just be, not I say just, look at me, just, yeah, it can be emotional, it can be spiritual, all the ways that you can be manipulated in these states are they all have the ability to do harm, especially in this really heightened emotional state that you go into. So what kinds of things, because prior to now there just haven't been a lot of places that people could go to for this. So can you tell us what Shine Collective is doing along these lines?
Shine. Yeah, I can absolutely tell you about Shine. We just started. We're just kind of in its like primary stages of filing all the paperwork and doing all of the things. But the Shine Collective is a organization that's dedicated to survivors of psychedelic harm. What we're seeing is when you get assaulted or abused, when you're in these highly suggestible, vulnerable states, it's very confusing. It like doesn't organize the same way that a traditional assault trauma would kind of organize in your somatic system, in your memory. Um, and it's a really unique type of traumatic event that can be really debilitating in the acute phases of not really knowing where to go, who to talk to, if your memory is remembering it correctly. There are few and far between, but there are stories of people who have felt like they've been assaulted while under doing psychedelic medicine work and pull the videotape and like nobody touched them, but like their experience was that they were getting assaulted, and that doesn't stop them from having the traumatic response and memory from their experience, from their lens. And so this is, very like interesting, hairy, like work around this, like, he said, they said, they said, what actually happened, like if you're in a altered state, can you remember, how can you remember, um when trauma comes up that's, past life or pre-verbal, and it has a very real experience, that still happens, like, right, those things happen. But also, like, people are actually getting assaulted, people are actually getting raped, people are getting physically violent. There are, cases where people are dying. Um, and it's kind of like the sexual assault, domestic violence kind of survivor world doesn't understand the complexity of like what psychedelic abuse is. And so it was like kind of people were like, well, I don't really feel like there's any place for me to go. And with the Power Trip podcast that came out from Symposia and some other, the Atma in Canada, David Harder case, there are some things that are coming out in the public that survivors are coming forward saying, wait, that happened to me, or something like that happened to, where am I supposed to go? And there's not really a place for anybody to go. And so Catherine McLean and Leah Friedwoman started a psychedelic survivors program 2 years ago ish. That was just a small little project that was a survivor group um, that Shine is kind of taking over facilitation. So one of the things that we offer is a peer support group, virtual group for anyone who identifies as a psychedelic survivor. It's a closed group. It is 8 to 10 sessions, depending on participants and availability, where survivors can come together and share their stories, be believed, um, find coping tools, learn from each other. If you wanted to reach out to Shine, we do a 45-minute pro bono consultation that can help people find some actionable steps. Right? Like if you were criminally assaulted, like have you gone to law enforcement? Have you filed any paperwork? Do you need a restraining order? Like kind of like what are some steps that you can take? um Blocking people on social media, like how do you protect yourself and your psyche? um like little, and so we'll talk to anybody, we'll schedule a 45-minute call with anybody who just kind of wants some like, what kind of steps can I take? Possibly, I mean, you're an attorney, but psychedelic bar association, would they be able to pro bono? Could we offer mediation services if there's two people who require mediation? And so really kind of, what are your needs? Let's do like a little, like, I'm such a social worker, right? Like let's do a little needs assessment, and like let's figure out where you are and what kind of resources are available to you. And then if that survivor wants to participate in group support, we will have like a 8 to 10 week group. And then after that, ideally, as we continue to grow, those survivors will get trained in group facilitation, and then it will be fully peer led. We also want to do a group for friends and family, for people who have been harmed by psychedelics, whether that is spouses of somebody who's now a sexual assault survivor or parents who lost a child. We also do education and ethics consultations. And so happy to talk to people about drug safety, help organizations, underground facilitators craft like better informed consent, safety guidelines, things like that. And so we're really going to start looking into some psychedelic harms, seeing what trends are, and seeing how we can best create programming to support survivors.
That's incredible. I love that so much. And I know you guys are still in just the kind of initial phases, but it sounds to me like there will be a place for pro bono work from, like you said, perhaps some lawyers, that kind of thing. And, I know there are a lot of people that want to help. They want to get, you know, into the psychedelics industry, learn more, contribute in some way, but maybe they don't have the time to like be a fireside volunteer. But if they are an attorney and they could volunteer a few pro bono hours per month to do a mediation or to advise, it sounds like that would be fantastically useful to the organization.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you can go to our website, which is shinesupport.org. And there's a get involved tab on the website. You can contact us if you're looking to enroll in support. If you want to donate, please donate. I would love if this was a community funded project. I think that that is important and vital, and I would rather have diverse, smaller funds than having one or two foundations to support. Now, also, if you're a one or two foundation and you want to support our entire thing, I am totally open to that as well. But also, making sure that we have enough of a sustainable budget that we can provide these services and compensate facilitators, pay for education and workshop. We would love to partner with other educational platforms. Um, one of the projects that I am building for Shine is a survivor storytelling project. One of the things that we've found in survivor healing process is the power of storytelling, the power of being able to like put it all down and then put it out into the world and have it be a chapter that's in the past, that has an ending to it, and now you're in the present future. And the power of being able to share your story, and then also the power of witnessing it. And so we would love to do with like local psychedelic societies, to do a kind of psychedelic survivor salon series where we can have survivors come and tell stories and bear witness to this part of the psychedelic renaissance that deserves a voice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. In all the forms, like if and I think so a lot of it is bringing some things out into the sunlight so that the shame can't fester, right? If you were
correct.
taken for money, it doesn't have to be sexual assault, right? If it, somehow you were swindled and fell into one of these MLM things, like bring that out in the light to get rid of that shame and also help educate other people as to what can happen. If you don't know what can happen, you can't protect yourself from it very well. So I love that that you have these services and these ways that I think will simultaneously help with the catharsis, but also educate at the same time, which is a prevention technique. So it's just you're doing a lot of good in kind of a 360 way. So
Thanks.
I really appreciate all the thought that you put into this. Okay, so you said people can go to shinesupport.org
Yes.
if they need support or to
To
volunteer or to
donate or to
donate.
volunteer. Yeah, if you say that, if you're like, "Oh, I'm willing to, I'm a mental health person, I'm willing to facilitate a group, or I'm an attorney and I'm willing to do pro bono mediation, or I'm a social media person and want to help us manage our social media," that would be great also. And so really, if you just want to get involved, there are some great opportunities to do so. You could host an event, you can host a salon, you can help us crowdfund. Really, we would love to, you know, not participate in capitalism in some way, shape, or form, but also it's important, especially in kind of this like psychedelic spiritual healing realm where free labor and emotional labor is not financially compensated for. Um, we would love to be able to pay everybody to do the work that they do. And so I guess we would love if somebody wanted to donate their time as a social media manager, but we would also love to raise enough money that we could pay a social media manager to like do the things that they need to do, right? And
Right.
so if you want to volunteer, great. If you want to help us fundraise, that's also great. Um, it's complicated. If you are a psychedelic practice, if you're a ketamine therapy practice and you are looking for charitable donations, like a place to donate, I'm a big advocate for organizations, for any kind of like psychedelic clinics, to be able to um, donate a percentage of their profit to us to make this sustainable.
I love that. Well, everybody else listening, if you've got any time or finances to donate, or very importantly, if you need Shine services, please go to shinesupport.org. Erica, I really appreciate just so much the decade plus work that you've done. I know when I met you, you were already far into it. So thank you for all the years you put into this and all the psychedelic, what was that? The escrow account. Amazing. Just these, the amount of time that I know you spent thinking about solutions to these challenges is a real testament to how much you care. And I really appreciate everything that you put into it. And anything else you want to tell people or just remind them to go to Shine?
Also, I mean, a much gratitude right back at you for starting the Psychedelic Medicine Association and Psychedelic Medicine Podcast, and for being transparent in your survivor story. I think that actually probably most people in the psychedelic world in some way will identify as a survivor or in some way resonate with someone's story. And I think it's important for us to build that community of it's okay, like we've made it through.
Yeah,
And we're on this side, and like it's our job to welcome people who are confused and struggling and need help, because without creating a container to catch them in, like we're not doing the work that we know that psychedelics can bring about in this world.
absolutely true. Thank you so much for that, Erica. And thanks for coming on again. And for everybody else out there, until next time. Thanks so much for listening to the Psychedelic Medicine Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave a rating or review as it helps others find the show. And if you'd like to learn more, you can find the show notes at plantmedicine.org/podcast, and there's information for clinicians at psychedelicmedicineassociation.org. Our incredible music was by the one and only Porangi. We'll see you next time.